Welcome to Raising the Bar, Geosciences Edition, a one-hour video conference featuring Dr. Ann Taylor, Assistant Dean for Distance Learning and Director of the Dutton E-Education Institute at Penn State University College of Earth and Mineral Sciences, and Dr. Elizabeth Page, Interim Director of the University Corporation for Atmospheric Research Community Programs Education and Training Center, as well as Director of the UCAR's COMET program, both part of the National Center for Atmospheric Research located in Boulder, Colorado. I am Steve Dandino, Associate Provost at Colorado State University and Executive Director of the Reinvention Collaborative. And on behalf of the RC's Research University members, I want to thank Drs. Taylor and Page, as well as Dr. Sean Bryan and his colleagues in the Department of Geosciences at Colorado State University for organizing this professional development opportunity for geosciences faculty. Sean will serve as our moderator. Sean, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Steve. And I also want to thank the Reinvention Collaborative for organizing this video conference series. Dr. Taylor and Dr. Page, we really appreciate you joining us and for sharing your time and expertise with us today. I really think that those of us within the Geosciences department at CSU, as well as other departments around the country and around the world, will really benefit from the perspective that you're going to share with us today. In the format of the Raising the Bar video conferences, we've asked each of our guests to share their sort of top 5 features of effective and engaging online education. We're going to first hear from Dr. Taylor and then from Dr. Page. And then following the presentations, we'll have additional time for more informal Q&A. Dr. Taylor, you want to take it away?
Thanks, Sean. Welcome, everybody. It's always a good sign to see so many people interested in teaching and learning. And I know in addition to the people physically here with us today, this is something that can be shared with many colleagues across your network. So I'm glad you're here. I am going to share some slides with you that'll guide my top 5. Just a little background. Such a nice introduction. I am at the College of Earth and Mineral Sciences at Penn State, where, like Colorado State, we have a Department of Geosciences, and I work very closely with our department. But a little background, I've been in the field of distance education for 28 years, 26 at Penn State. And, I get used to how we do things. We have been doing distance education since the late 1800s. Seriously, think rural post-delivery. So when online came to being in the 1990s, we were poised, we were ready, and I was a learning designer, otherwise often called an instructional designer back then. So this has been my life's work, so to speak. I'm going to cheat. I'm just going to tell you right now, because when Sean asked if we would share our top 5, the first thing I thought when I looked at, he said about course design and course instruction is they're really different. They're really different. So I'm going to do 10. We're going to do 5 of each. So I'm going to have to go fast. You can design you can put together a really awesome online course. But if you are not on top of your game teaching that course, it can be a complete and utter disaster. Likewise, you can have the most poorly designed online course and have it be a fabulous experience for your students and have them totally reach all the learning outcomes because you're such a great teacher. You're so good in the delivery, the instruction. So, hence my cheating. So we'll start by looking at, and this I'm just going to also say, this was really hard. Being in this field for 28 years, picking your top 5 is not an easy task. So I'm sure as soon as we're done today, I'll think of other ones I wish I'd put right up there too. But in terms of the design of a course, my very first advice for someone is always design backwards. You're geoscientists, not in the engineer field necessarily, but engineers are really used to this idea of backward design. You basically, in education, figure out what is it I want my students to get out of this course, the learning outcomes, and then how am I going to know if they can do or know those things or apply those things? And then, okay, if those are, that's how I'm going to know they can do these things. What am I going to need to teach them? What kind of experiences are they going to need to have? So for example, if the goal of a course was to teach you how to play Mary Had a Little Lamb on the piano, how am I going to assess that? Well, it's not going to be an essay exam. It's going to be having you play a Mary Had a Little Lamb. And then depending on what I know about the skills and knowledge you bring in, I may have to start my course with the very basic rudiments of the keyboard and finger placement and so forth. So you always want to start with your end in mind. That and I've got resources I'm going to share with you. You can learn much more about backward design, following this, and I'm always happy to talk about it too. Next, you've done this incredible backward design that actually takes a lot of effort, not 5 seconds. Now you're ready to think about how you're going to do these things, and you really need to focus on selecting the right tool for the job. In the online world, we can do things in real time, synchronously, like we are right now. We can do things asynchronously, where people are logging into a website or reading an article on their own time and their own place within usually some structure, like by next week, I need you to have done this and this and this. So you have to make some of those decisions, and there's different tools that are better for different and different. Sometimes synchronous is good for things, and sometimes asynchronous is good for things. I like to think of a very popular model from K through 12 called the flipped classroom. And in a nutshell, it's the philosophy of the flipped classroom is, let's use that real time, that face-to-face, like we're doing right now, for things that make sense. They're two-way. So normally I probably wouldn't be doing this. It would be two-way exchange of information, or role playing, or helping you work on math problems or something of that nature. And the asynchronous time, the time when you're on your own, for the things that are one way. So, either you're reading a textbook, or you're watching a lecture, or you're reading a lecture, or you're researching something online. It's things that don't require that face-to-face environment. So again, I've got resources on that if you're interested. You also, a really well-designed online course has 3 different opportunities for regular, meaningful engagement. Engagement between the student and the instructor, engagement between the students and their peer learners, and engagement with the content. And you have to have all 3. If you only have engagement between the student and the content, and you're basically not present, AWOL, it's not going to be a rich, meaningful experience. They want to learn from each other, they want to learn from you, and they want to learn from the core content of your course. You also want to make the course as active as possible. Active learning is a buzzword you've probably heard a million times, but it's really important. Students just want to sit there and learn passively. We talked about that today. Let's get through this presentation so we can get to the Q&A and the exchange. It's really important that your students are actively involved in your course. Just because it's online doesn't mean you design something where they're just going to sit back and passively take it in. You also want to make sure that whatever you develop is accessible. This is some place I've seen things totally fall down. We put the best course design together, and then we haven't taken into account students that might have special needs in our class. We regularly run into people with visual impairments, hearing impairments, students who they have a Mac and we've based everything on software that is PC only, or lots of live video and they don't have stable internet access. I mean, you've got to think these things through with your students. So again, if I had to pick 5, those are my 5, but there's many more. The best resources that I could point you to are learning designers. And I say that obviously very selfishly, that's my background, but these are people who have usually a graduate education in how to teach, in education. They're a tremendous resource, and it's really been fun. I'm sure you're familiar. This is a fun audience to have because you know these people, but with Richard Alley, for example. Richard Alley is literally a rock star in the geosciences world. He's somebody that I would never think I could teach a single thing to about how to teach. He attends every one of our professional development events almost without fail. He is always going on and on about how much he's learned from collaborating with our learning designers because he cares about teaching and he's always open to learning more. So if you have learning designers at your campus, that's great. We are very fortunate at Penn State that we do have a tremendous amount. As for these other resources, I will leave these with you. I'm going to give them to Steve and Liz, and they will be able to share them with you. These are all hyperlinks. One that's particularly fun that you might enjoy is this Hours of Instructional Activity Equivalence. We're in the process of creating an actual calculator. So you can say, you know, I'm going to assign my students to do a research paper of about this length. I wonder how long that should take them. You know, you're trying to figure out, like, I know how long things take in a face-to-face classroom. How long do they take in this online world? So I think you'll get a lot out of that in particular as you start to design your course. All right, instruction. So we've put together the course and now you or maybe someone else is gonna teach it. Usually you, at least the first time I would hope, work all those kinks out. So what's important about teaching that online course? Well, the nice thing about online courses is the way we do them, we usually do them, they're canned in a sense. The faculty member has spent months working with our learning design team to put together this wonderful online course experience. So when the course actually begins, a lot of the lecture is done. It's usually in text form, or it's in video, or it's a combination. Got all the learning activities. Now is the time to be a coach. Your role during that semester, the most important thing you can do is provide ongoing guidance, support, and motivation to your students. You have to be present. This is not a set it and forget it environment. I heard a faculty member telling another faculty member, I should say, we had stopped using faculty member number 1. He was telling faculty member number 2, oh, you're going to love this online thing. You don't have to do anything. I'm like, that's why we don't use you anymore. You've got to be in there. We try to get our faculty to be in there at least every day, provide response. If someone posts a question, something to a discussion forum, you want to make sure that somebody is attending them every day. You don't want to be quelching class discussion. I don't mean that, but just watering and feeding and keeping things going. You want to be always giving meaningful, timely feedback. I am so sorry, they just started mowing outside my window, so there may be a hum. Thanks, Zoom. But you always want to provide meaningful, timely feedback on student work. One of the biggest things I see fall apart in online instruction, where the students aren't necessarily there to visibly hound you for that paper they just handed in, is faculty who don't provide timely feedback on assignment 1, and now assignment 2 or 3 or 4 are due. And how is this poor student supposed to know what they should be doing and what they did well and what they need to work on? So super important. And just communication in general, helping students always know regularly, daily, weekly, what are they supposed to be doing and what are you doing throughout the course. If you get sick and you aren't going to be able to teach, let them, for a few days, let them know, and hopefully find someone else to slip in and help water and feed your course while you're not there. Or, I know I haven't given you back that paper yet, but I'm working on it and I plan to have it to you by Friday at 5. Communication of expectations solves so many problems proactively. And finally, have a backup plan, because something always goes awry. I literally was giving a webinar once. It was an hour long. I was the speaker. I had to do it from the road. I was in a hotel and the fire alarm went off. I had to leave. Thank goodness I had printed my slides out. I quickly called into the Zoom on my cell phone, and went down the stairs and outside the hotel and was able to keep going. You got to plan for these things. So again, oops, sorry about that. Lots of resources that Steve and Liz will be able to share with you. Some of these are my absolute favorite. We've developed a best practice and the expectations for online teaching that covers a lot of those instructional do's and don'ts. We have a peer review of online teaching that I developed, oh gosh, over a decade ago, that we actually give to faculty before they're going to teach online, so they see what we would expect of good teaching. Managing your online course will walk you through a semester. Here's what you should do before the course begins. Here's what you do week 1, week 3, and so on. And then finally, this web learning at Penn State, plethora of resources, including these that we've developed across the university that I think could be really helpful to you as you teach online. Whew. With that, I'm going to stop and turn it over to Liz. We're going to wait until the end for questions. So I will take a breath and let Liz take it away.
All right, great. Thank you, Annie. That was a wonderful presentation. I am going to share my screen. Can everyone see my presentation? Can anyone not see my presentation? I guess I'm going to go forward. All right. My name is Liz Page. I am the director of the COMET program, which is part of the University Corporation for Atmospheric Research in Boulder, Colorado. I am an alumni of Colorado State, so I just like to start off with say, go Rams. I received my master's and PhD from the Atmospheric Science Department at CSU. So I spent a lot of time in Fort Collins. My topic is the top 5 features of superior online learning, online teaching. I'm going to give it the spin of using professional development techniques applied to university courses. My background, I've spent most of my career in training and teaching. I've taught in the university setting, and I have done professional development for quite a bit of time. I do also have experience as an operational weather forecaster. So the approach that I take to training is professional development in terms of improving performance of environmental forecasters. So if I can figure out how to go to the next slide. There we go. I just wanted to give you a little overview of the professional development that I have done. Again, I'm the director of the COMET program. We have a training portal called the MedEd website, and it is geared towards professional development of geoscientists. Primarily, we were started to support weather forecasters who were part of the National Weather Service modernization in the early 90s. And they were learning how to do both small-scale weather forecasting and also using Doppler radar and incorporating that into our forecasting capabilities. So that is sort of how we started out. In the last 3 decades, we've been around for 30 years now, we have grown to expand our training into different parts of the geosciences, including hydrology and water management. We have some training for firefighters in terms of fire weather, and those are the examples that I'll be using in this presentation. And also we have a topic, if you go to the education and training link here, this is just a screen capture of our first page of the MedEd training portal. We have a geospatial topic area, and that is mainly contains training that we've done for the National Geodetic Survey. So I'm hoping to find out from you whether any of that training might be helpful in your geoscience classes. So the way we approach training, we take a team approach to training. We have instructional designers who help design all of our training. We use scientific subject matter experts in the field on the topic in which we're approaching. And we have staff scientists also on staff who help translate the very technical information into to the target audience that we are working with. And then we have a 3D graphic designer who puts together graphics and animations. He's now starting to work in both augmented and virtual reality space. And we have a web developer that builds all of our training. So our target audiences are the groups from the sponsor agencies who are working in the field. But what we found when we put a registration system on MEDED in 2007 is that 40% of the people going to our website are from universities, faculty and students, mainly students. Many faculty members use our training to augment the coursework that they're doing. And we found that it's been very successful. I want to talk a little bit about why I think that is. So one of the things that we do in terms of developing our training, it is very focused on how we're improving performance of environmental forecasters. And so it's when we approach it, we talk with our subject matter experts of what do you want people to do after they take this training. And when I was talking about this presentation today with one of our instructional designers, he said, wow, you have to narrow down to 5 things. He said, well, if there's one piece of advice I could give anyone starting to do online teaching, it is make your students do something. Because when we are doing online training, we are competing with a lot of different things that are going on in the students' world that we can't see. When they're sitting in the classroom, we can see what the other things are that might be distracting them, whether it's their phone or their laptop or whatever. But when they're sitting in their location, you can't really see all the different distractions going on, like whether the cat's jumping on their lap or if someone's running into the room that they're trying to use for training. So it's really important to engage them in the learning process. One way to do that is to ask them questions that require them to give an answer. Using Zoom, there's a way to do breakout sessions, so you can have students break out into their own breakout rooms and discuss different questions or do different things as part of the learning experience, and then come back and report their findings. So we recently released a recorded webinar, which is called How to Be Alone Together, Teaching Geosciences in Quarantine. And we have a group of people from COMET who are presenting this information, which includes scientists and instructional designers. So I have a link to that I can make available, and it's also available on the MEDED website. So what they focused on is looking at connection. How do you connect with the different people that are involved in the course? How do you engage the students? And then how do you assess them? Very similar to what Annie was just talking about. So the second recommendation I have is develop performance objectives. Again, think about what you want the students to do after they've had this experience. You can include abilities like, you can include things like abilities to explain the importance of what was covered, and then think about how you would measure their success. So after they have had this learning experience, how would you decide whether it was successful for them or not? And then building the interactions through the course is part of how you decide that you would want to measure that success. The next thing is use real world examples. The nice thing about the geosciences in general is there's a plethora of real world examples that you can bring into the classroom. The nice thing about teaching applied sciences is that people can walk outside and experience what they've just learned in the classroom. We've definitely found that in meteorology. I'm assuming that other areas of the geosciences that is true as well. We use case studies to teach our content through different events. So very often what we do is we use the case itself to set the stage for the content and teach things specifically that show up in the case that are the content that we are trying to bring across. So for instance, if we are teaching about hurricane preparedness, we'll use an actual hurricane example and talk about how that specific hurricane progressed and moved through different areas, and then what kinds of things people did in response to that. Another way to do this is to ask students to bring examples of the types of phenomena you might be thinking about, so such as photos that depict something that you're covering in the class, and then students can work together in groups to explain what's depicted in that photo. The fourth recommendation I have is incorporate simulations. This is something that we have started doing in our online courses, and it's been really effective. The idea is you set the stage with a scenario, and again, this incorporates a case study as well, that requires students to make decisions. So when you set this up, you basically set the stage. This is what's going on. These are the kinds of decisions that need to be made based on the scenario I've set up. What decision would you make? What would you recommend to someone? And in weather cases, often it's something like an emergency manager is calling in. They want to know whether they need to evacuate an area. They need to know in a certain period of time. So you have a time slot in which you can make a decision, and then you make a recommendation to them. What we've done is we've included consequences for poor decisions. So we set up the scenario, we ask somebody a question, they answer it, and then the person that's asked this question responds to the way that they've answered it. And if they've been vague, if they've just given bad information, then that person gives them feedback that lets them know that they don't think that that was a good decision. The other thing that you can do in these scenarios is provide a sense of urgency, so that some decision is time sensitive and they need to make that decision and then answer the question. We have used feedback to these types of situations to reinforce the concepts that were used in the simulation. And in some cases, you can actually teach the entire content through the feedback. So if you ask a question and then they go through and answer it, you can then explain why their answer was correct or incorrect with the feedback that you give. We found that, well, and basically in education, it's been found that people who answer things incorrectly gives them a motivation to then learn the content, to figure out both why they've answered it incorrectly and also, what the actual real answer is, what the right answer is. So this we found has been really effective in the different training that we've done. Okay, and then finally, bringing it all together. So helping at the end of this learning activity, helping people understand, what was the point of covering this topic? What exactly was the information that you were trying to provide? What did you want them to take away from that? And what did you want them to be able to do after they completed that event? And then how does this fit into the rest of the course? So, give it the bigger picture as well. And then when you start off at the next class, it's nice to do a summary of what was done at the previous class, and then use that as part of the link to what you're going to discuss next. So that is everything that I wanted to share, and I want to thank you for your attention. I took this information and some of the examples of what I was talking about could be found in these two modules that are on the MEDED website, and I used fire weather examples again. This is my area of expertise. So the situational awareness in the fire environment, this is both understanding what's going on in a situation when you're forced to make decisions, and also the fire weather clear communications, which is a simulation where you are actually trying to communicate things effectively and then getting feedback from the person to which you're trying to communicate this. And if you want to learn more about what's available on the MEDED website, this is the URL right here, the www.meded.ucar.edu. So thank you very much. That's all I have. And I should stop sharing my screen. Sorry. There we go.
Thank you very much, Dr. Page and Dr. Taylor, for those presentations. Those are excellent, and I'd like to now open it up for questions. And we've got a small enough group that anyone can just jump in, go ahead and unmute your mic and ask questions that you may have.
While you're thinking, because I have a feeling there'll be a moment of silence, I love Liz's examples, and it reminded me to share with you some of the VR virtual reality field trips that we have for the geosciences in particular. So there's some other examples of the kinds of things Liz was talking about. So I just put that in the chat area.
I've got a couple questions. My first is, what is reasonable to accomplish in, say, a month?
So Derek, we hit that in March, right? So here at Penn State, we had all these residential courses that mid-March, all of a sudden, our president said, you got to put your course online like next week. we made a really, and continue to make, a big differentiation between online teaching and remote teaching. Our online courses that we've developed over the last 20 years are incredibly robust. We use a team approach like Liz, exactly like Liz was describing, with learning designers and programmers and multimedia specialists and so forth. And it takes us at least 2 semesters working with the faculty member, the faculty content expert, to get that course ready to go. So what can we do? Like you said, in a month, in a week. The first thing that, and one of the resources that I shared with you is called Remote Teaching at Penn State. And it's got a really nice model in it where they basically walk through that exact question, like, what do you do first? And first is identify and transform whatever you're going to need to a digital format. Is it your syllabus? Is it, you know, the really important readings that you were going to hand out that now you can't? What are some things that you can do, as I said, with the flipped model? What are some things you can do synchronously? What are some things you can do asynchronously? But honestly, the easiest and the route most of our faculty took was to use something like Zoom, which we used throughout our university, to best as they could replicate what they were going to do for the rest of the semester. So if they were used to lecturing 3 times a week for an hour each time, well, then now they use Zoom to do that. And so it wasn't as big of a flip. They had to learn how to use Zoom. They had to, you know, make sure they were comfortable with the technology and so forth. And then we helped them fill in the pieces, like, I was going to give a proctored exam. How do I do that now? And again, if you have access to learning designers, they can help you with all those problem pieces. So, you know, the first thing is to kind of deconstruct your course. Figure out, what would you have done if it was taught face-to-face? And how are you going to, as a baby step, how are you going to replicate that? Don't worry about trying to create the most amazing, fantabulous online course you've ever seen. Just how am I going to, as a first step, take what I would have done in the classroom and move it to an online environment? And for a lot of our faculty, that also meant learning a lot more about our learning management system. We use Canvas. It was shocking how many had really never even posted a syllabus there, let alone use the quiz feature and the polling features and all these other neat things that they could do. So that also gives you a month to get up to speed on things like that if you need to.
Thank you. Could I also ask, my students typically do problem solving on the board as part of their classroom activity. Do you have any advice, or does anyone have any advice of how students can do this online? And they write a lot of equations.
Oh, that's huge in our college. We just go real low tech. So we use Zoom. Do you use Zoom at Colorado State? I think. I mean, Steve, you're using Zoom. You're at Colorado State. So you can set your Zoom room up to have a whiteboard feature, and you can make it possible for your students to use that whiteboard feature. So most of our faculty, very low tech, they just do that. They say, hey, student, you know, why don't Sean, why don't you take the reins and you work through this problem using the whiteboard, and everyone can see it, and so forth. I've also had faculty, you know, get fancy when they're doing their own equations, and they'll connect in like an iPad or even their phone. There are a lot of other ways, and actually I'll make a note and I can send you some of the how-to documents that we've created for our faculty to do easy, low-tech whiteboard type things that you could replicate.
To follow up on that, if I may, the students don't have an easy method for doing that. Writing an equation with a mouse is not. And some of the students' handwriting, I mean, they just can't do it. So if you don't have access to, you know, some kind of a pen that you can use, it kind of falls flat. I mean,
Well,
I can't do things.
We've had them use pen and paper and their phone with a camera
Just hold it up.
And you should see how creative some of these pictures, when I share these sites with you, you'll see how people have set up stacks of books with their phone hanging off the end to make a little instant, document camera. So you're right, you're totally right. But man, we've learned how to be creative in the last few months.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had students doing exams, well, take-home exams in that way, because a lot of them didn't have printers. They couldn't figure out, how to answer the questions.
Yeah.
It was just really tricky.
I have a quick question. Great presentations. Thank you very much for those. I really enjoyed them. In both your presentations and just in other reading that I've done on the topic, we hear a lot about pursuing synchronous learning and the benefits of that versus asynchronous learning and kind of the benefits of accessibility and other responsibilities. And as a faculty member, I'm kind of left being like, well, what's right? Like everyone's saying that one's right. Other people are saying that one's right. I don't really like this idea of the mix. Like, sure, do a synchronous one where you have 2 people participating and then the rest of the class like tunes in later. So I just wondering if you guys had any advice on how to navigate that one.
Absolutely. Oh, Liz, it looked like you were going to jump in.
Well, I just wanted to mention that I understand what you mean by doing it separately. Like some people take it asynchronously, some people are synchronous. I think that if you make certain synchronous mandatory, that's helpful in terms of generating discussions. I think it's also helpful for people to have recorded versions they can go back and look at as well. I think that's sort of an advantage that we're seeing in this situation that wasn't necessarily happening before in the live classroom. But you might think about some asynchronous things that might be helpful as well, whether it is, watching a YouTube video or reading some section in their textbook or something like that to then prepare them for the discussion. But the key is that if you are having a very interactive discussion as your live synchronous event, then you're going to be encouraging the students to tune in for that. But I'll defer to you, Annie.
No, absolutely. And I did not mean the high flex model is one you might have read about a lot in the news, and that's the kind of like some people are synchronous and some aren't. That is not something I'm proposing. I meant some aspects of your class are synchronous for everyone, and then you do other things asynchronously. So here's how I would have flipped today in that kind of a world. I might have had Liz and I'm not saying we should have done this, just example. Liz and I could have each recorded our presentation. It was one way. You just sat and listened for 15 minutes, so you wouldn't have lost anything. And your assignment could have been to have watched that before we joined as we are now. And then we'd only use this synchronous time for this rich discussion. Now, of course, when you do that, one of the things about the flipped classroom where you do the one way out of class and the two-way things in class is you want to have some way of making students accountable for what they were supposed to do outside of the class. And that's easy enough. You can have them take a little quiz. You can have them write a little reflective paragraph about what they got out of Liz's presentation or my presentation that they have to submit, or there's all sorts of ways. Those are just quick, silly examples, but it's that idea of chopping up your class in that manner. I just wanted to point, I think this is one of the resources that I link to, and if not, I will make sure that I do. But one of the resources we developed for this this new world is a website my colleagues and I from across Penn State developed, going back to that, engaging with the student, engaging with the other learners, and engaging with the content. What are some ways of doing it synchronously and asynchronously? And for each one, let me scroll, sorry, you all are in my way, there we go. For each one, they're like, for teacher-student interaction, well, some of the affordances of doing it asynchronously, and what are some of the limitations of doing it asynchronously? And if you do decide to go forward, what are some ideas of ways you can do that? So something like this might help you in thinking through what makes sense and what doesn't. But again, I always just go back to the what's one way and what's two way and go from there.
That's great. That's really helpful. I guess my concern is, students that may be in a different time zone, international students and/or students that don't have reliable internet. And then you have this synchronous component that's a required component, and then it's therefore not very accessible. And I'm not sure how to navigate that. It's a hard one where it's like, sure, maybe 80% of your class is in the same place and can do that and be there with reliable internet. But for that 20% that's not, are we meeting their needs? And is it fair to offer this in a synchronous manner?
Well, and for that reason, to be quite honest, our college, just our little college within Penn State, we've developed over 150 fully online, robust courses over the last 20 years. They're all asynchronous. We really discourage faculty, because we are offering these students around the world. We really discourage them from doing much synchronous, at least much required synchronous. And when they do multiple time zone options. Sometimes they might do a Tuesday morning and Thursday late at night, the same session. As Liz said, we have them record them and so forth. But, we do have situations where people move forward and they decide it's going to be synchronous, and at the very least having it recorded and giving students meaningful ways to have asynchronous engagement with the student, with the instructor, with the content, even if they can't be part of the synchronous session, is really important. And that's where Learning Designer, again, can help.
And we found that we do some courses with groups in India and Africa, so the time zone thing is a real issue with us in Boulder. So one of the things we do is an active forum. So people are contributing through the forum, and the instructor is very active in that as well. And then also we find that doing these sort of capstone projects are very effective as well, where people take something, especially from their location, if you have a really geographical diverse student group, because then people are learning new things about their location as well. So we do that with the hydrology class, and we found some really interesting things about different portions of India and what the hydrology challenges are in those locations.
Thank you.
Yeah, I might jump in with a question here. I think one of the most difficult aspects of transitioning some of our geoscience courses to the online environment has been the reliance on kind of physical samples and field experiences in many of the courses. And these experiences are really sort of immersive, and they immerse the students in a problem using all their senses. And I think that's really difficult to replicate in an online environment. Or if you have any thoughts or suggestions on how to approach that problem.
Well, if you're Derek and you only have 1 month, that's hard. It is hard. But there are, like the link I put in the chat area, those virtual field trips, we're adding those every day. Our university is trying to come up with ways to take people to field experiences, to give them instruments that they can use. They're working on some of those right now that are completely foreign to me because I'm not a geoscientist, but they're apparently common instruments they would have used in the field, and they're able to do it virtually, a lot like what Liz was showing. They also have a lot of luck trying to, coming up with creative ways to have students, as Liz was saying, use their own backyard. Go out, and we've had people taking soil samples and doing that. And then at the very least, we literally have had introductory rocks for jocks where we have shipped mineral packets to students. There are companies that do that. It's kind of great, actually. And then we can lead them through how to do different experiments and so forth online. Liz, you've had a lot of experience with this.
Yeah, we have really used video extensively for that. So if you have that available, in terms of showing videos of how things work, how you do different measurements, that has been somewhat successful. I would definitely say that this is a situation where it's not as great as being out there with, with the students and working on these different problems.
Nor is it something you put together on the fly.
Absolutely.
Right.
I have one virtual field trip that I've put together. It's just a PowerPoint, but it works. I think I've used it because the weather sometimes goes south on that trip and it lets me back it up. It's not perfect, but it's better than nothing.
It is neat that so many people out there have put these together really robust. So, I mean, ours are like, you know, ideally you're using, you know, the Google, God, I can't think today, you know, the Google Cardboard or what have you, or an Oculus if you're really fancy. And a lot of them are canned and you can incorporate them into your class. You just got to do some creative Googling. If you're lucky, you'll find them.
I found a lot at the intro level, very little beyond that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a huge challenge in your field. Our other challenge is our material sciences program, where the equipment is bazillion-dollar equipment that they really need to be able to come in and use. And there's very little, you know, you can find virtual optical microscopes and things of that nature, but you know, I am seeing one good thing coming out of all of this is I'm seeing more of that, because people are getting creative or investing the time and the resources to create those things that ultimately will benefit all of us. I know one of our faculty was saying one of the field trips that he regularly did with his students, he was limited to a 15-person passenger van, and it was a small class. And what do you do if you wanted to have, you know, 100 people go on that field trip? He says, well, now I can, in a sense. I still can only take 15 physically with me, but, you know, I can make it available and have a virtual walkthrough for many more people. Kind of interesting. So are you all teaching this fall online, supposedly, or do you not know yet? What's Colorado State decided?
It's still in flux a little bit. We're going to be at least partially on campus. Getting guidance on, you know, lower class sizes and trying to, you know, move into larger rooms and things like that. Some of the larger classes will definitely be fully online, but still very much in flux.
We are too. We aren't supposed to know till at least June 15th. And there's, I don't know if you saw the article, you can Google Inside Higher Ed 15 models and you should come up. I'll try to remember to include it in my list, but there's so many different ways you can do this. And so, yeah, we're in the same boat. But moving the large lecture style courses online is a easier, low-hanging fruit for us. And then you can use those big spaces for the medium-sized classes and spread everyone out and so forth.
I wonder if I could ask a question as a non-geoscientist. Are there subfields, you know, that are represented in geosciences that we haven't addressed, and particularly pedagogical challenges for some of our colleagues in the broader sort of field of geosciences that we ought to touch upon, or that would be helpful if we did? We've heard about weather.
I think the hands-on nature of what we do that Sean brought up is our biggest dilemma. I can even do pretty well with, you know, photomicrographs, taking photos and things like that, but a photograph of a rock is just not the same thing. Even a video of a rock is not the same thing. I found some 3D images and the students had a lot of trouble. There were technical issues in trying to share those. So that's probably my biggest dilemma, because I teach a field and lab-based course in rocks.
Yeah, the other aspect to a lot of geoscience courses that, you know, I think we could maybe touch on is the use of real world data and data analysis. And so maybe if you have thoughts on best practices for having students work with data in an online environment?
We have tons of courses where we do just that. That's actually much easier. Giving them access to the data, making sure they know where to go and how to manipulate it. We've got many classes that use, national databases, national sources. Sometimes, and we teaching them how to use something like R or whatever the package is. We have a lot of online programs in GIS, for example. There's a lot of, again, existing how-to resources out there that a faculty member can really utilize and not have to totally start from scratch. So the data now, so actually we're about to launch a new geospatial data analysis master's program. And because this is something that is so hot right now, and very easy for our faculty to do, because they've been doing it online.
I had a question for you guys. Are you interacting at all with other universities in terms of sharing the burden of moving things online? Things like developing data sets that could be used in courses?
I've been trying to form a coalition of seismologists through over many universities. Well, one of the challenges in my field is people just haven't had the time to follow best practices. So there's no learning goals, there's no grand objectives. So a lot of what we're doing is just trying to build a set of online lectures with supplementary notes. And what I'm really excited about is we can all flip the classes next year when everything's back in session.
Yeah, I'm hoping that a lot of the things that we learn through this experience will also improve in classroom courses when we're all back in the classroom.
One of the things I'm like a broken record, but I'm always saying is good teaching is good teaching. And this has actually been kind of a fun way to help faculty who maybe weren't having the experience they wanted in the classroom really ramp up those techniques that, as Liz said, they'll be able to take right back to a face-to-face setting.
Yeah, there's been a number of places, I think most of it organized through NAGT, National Association of Geoscience Teachers, and CERC, compiling resources. A lot of it's focused at the introductory level, but we're seeing more kind of upper level topics being developed there as well. As Steve mentioned, we'll try to link to some of those sources in the notes for this as well.
Do you think that this experience will change, once we're back in the classroom, will that change about things that you might be capturing in case of a situation like this, or just in moving online education forward?
I think one thing is recording lectures so that students can revisit them asynchronously. I think that really helps, because I know even as you guys were talking, it was like, wait, I didn't get that down, and it's gone. So, I mean, at least since we started using and posting PowerPoints a lot, that's helped with that. But I think the actual recorded lectures are good, and recorded discussions.
It's funny you say that, because when my son's finishing med school right now at Penn, but when he started 3 years ago, I was kind of surprised that they record all their lectures and immediately put them up online. I was like, well, no one will go to class. He said, oh, Mom, everyone goes to class. Like, you actually need it like 4 times, the same lecture. Like, there's so much information, and if you make it engaging and you make it meaningful, there's a lot of built-in motivation to not only go to class, but also watch the lecture, especially when you're studying for a test or something of that nature.
Well, I think Derek brought up an important point that I'll try to work with myself, is flipping at least some of the class.
Yeah.
in order to make use of some of the materials that we've devised. It's just everything was done on the fly and none of it's very good. When I look back, it's like, oh my gosh, gotta redo that. But,
Baby steps.
yeah.
That's a problem I'm running into, recorded short little lectures this past spring, but it was all done with a poor internet connection, and I wanted to try to use the real-time closed captioning, but it didn't work because my internet was too weak. And so, a lot of it's going to have to be redone.
Mhm.
One of the strategies we have used for a million years to develop online courses, because ours are text first, there's a lot of research that students don't want to watch hours of talking heads. So we often would take a recording a faculty member had done in their classroom and have it transcribed. And then we gave that back to them as the basis for a text first online course. And if there were parts of the video, maybe they were demonstrating something or whatever, we could incorporate those snippets in. But we went from a pretty crappy quality recording to a really robust text-based online course that maybe had those video snippets in it. It also gives you a chance to edit yourself, because you're always appalled at how often you misspoke or said or whatever. So it gives you a chance to kind of clean up your work. And it's a lot easier to keep updated, because one of the problems with doing solely video, even as a planned mechanism, even not during a pandemic, is that if the science changes, if there's something new in the field, if you want to change the way you talk about it, you got to record the whole video all over again. Whereas if you've taken a text first approach, you just have to change that chunk, or or you can bring a new guest speaker in a little video clip or something, but you don't have to redo the whole thing.
Well, it looks like we are just about out of time. I want to thank you again, Dr. Taylor and Dr. Page, for joining us. Thanks to the geoscience faculty who were able to join and generate a great discussion here. I think this has been a really amazing discussion. I think it'll be helpful to us moving forward, and I appreciate it.
Thank you for the opportunity.
And we will share, I'm sure Liz as well, our contact information. So please don't hesitate to reach out. When you've been doing this as long as we have, you've got file cabinets in your brain of resources and pointers to different things that could maybe help you. So feel free to reach out.
You're all amazingly generous. We thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a great day.
Thank you.